Hey guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at JacinioTweets and at SheKnowsArsenal. Welcome to another show. It was just a little bit blurry and I had to crisp it up. Not that I want you guys to really see me right now because I am dying. I haven't been here in a couple of days and I told you guys I wasn't going to be available for Newcastle match reviews and stuff like that because I was going to be in LA and doing a little bit of traveling and going to a concert, and I concerted my ass off. I went to Lovers and Friends, which is a one-day festival in Las Vegas, and I saw Jagged Edge, Chingy, Nelly, 50 Cent, Mariah Carey, Missy Elliott, Miguel, Usher, Chris Brown. The list goes on and on and on. But I am dying. I am dying. For those of you who are over the age of 30, you understand what I mean when I say that there are things that you do in your 30s that kind of remind you that you're old now. And that was one of them. I woke up the next morning. I could barely walk. I was dying. And now flying all the way back to London, I do feel like I could just lay in the bed and sleep all day. But I definitely can't do that because there's too much to talk about from an Arsenal perspective. We have new deals that could be signed. We have transfer rumors really heating up. And then we have Arsenal that have seemed to regain some semblance of form, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I landed from Vegas to LA a couple of minutes before the game started against Newcastle. And I was kind of happy because I was not feeling confident about this game. So I just won't have to stress out about it. But, I couldn't really look at my phone and actually watch the game because I was trying to Uber home and all this kind of stuff. And it was a mess. But every time I looked at my timeline, somebody was like, oh my gosh, they've done this. Oh my gosh, we're getting ran over. Oh my gosh, this is happening. And I was just this is so stressful. And then the Odegaard goal went in and I was like, wow, we're really ahead. This is insane. Maybe I should not watch many Arsenal games. Maybe that's when the form comes back, And so I did get a chance to watch the second half. And I thought, watching the second half and then rewatching the entire game again, that was probably my favorite moment of the season. I know a lot of people would say it's Bournemouth. It has to be Bournemouth. But, those were 3 points that we were not expected to get at all. And the reason why I could tell is because rivals were pissed. Those 3 points put us firmly back in the title race, albeit not with anything in our hands. We still have to hope that Manchester City drop points somewhere, but just going to St. James and getting 3 points at a place where most people felt like we wouldn't get anything really made me so happy. And yeah, that was such a good away performance from the dark arts, the streetwise, wasting time, getting in their face, getting in their heads. They were rattled from the 20-something minute, taking our chances, riding our luck a little bit. The changes that Mikel Arteta was brave enough to make with Jorginho playing in midfield and Kiwior playing as well. I just thought, that was a perfect away performance. Clean sheet. Ramsdale playing out of his skin. We'll be talking about Ramsdale and his new deal today. So from an Arsenal perspective, albeit it's still a little bit disappointing the way that the season is kind of went with the bad performances against Southampton and West Ham and stuff like that. I am happy to see that the team is rebounding in some ways. Let's see what you guys are saying. Saida says, I need to see that Lovers and Friends festival in the UK. America always gets the best lineups. I mean, if you're a 90s hip hop and R&B type of person, I would recommend Lovers and Friends 10 times over. Everybody is a little bit older, so you don't have young people passed out in corners because they're just effed up on drugs and stuff like that. Everybody's just having a good time. And the acts were really good. The only thing is I felt like it could have been 2 days because you had to really pick and choose what you were going to do. And there were some acts that I didn't get a chance to see. But overall, it was excellent. It's the best festival I've been to. Aha says it was Arteta's best away win as Arsenal manager, in my opinion, considering level of opposition, being in a title race, the game management, the shithousery, and time wasting. We should have scored at least 5. Yeah, I think the most impressive part of the game for me was Arteta's in-game management, the way that the team, like, I think we tried to do some of that dark arts and, time wasting against Liverpool, but it wasn't as clean. Like, it didn't work as good. If you remember, like, Jesus and Xhaka were really trying that. Like, even Gabriel and Ramsdale were trying to waste time at Anfield, and we got up 2-0, maybe too early, and we got a little bit too lax, and then we gave away that goal right before halftime. And yeah, from there, things just kind of unraveled. So, I did think that, and we didn't create enough chances, I felt like, in the second half of that game either, but overall, like, that was just a very clean away performance. And I know some people will be like, but Newcastle had chances. Well, yeah, of course they had chances. They're the home team and they're not a crap side. They're going to have chances at an away performance. You have to kind of, especially against teams like Newcastle, where they really have the fans behind them, and it's a ground that, people don't really get points at, and they're very confident and they're in form. They're going to get chances. So you have to ride your luck. Your goalkeeper has to have a really good game. You have to be streetwise, use the dark arts, time waste, and take your chances. That's what you have to do. And that's exactly what we did. And Arteta made the right subs at the right time. It was pretty much perfect. Amir says that game was our most mature performance under Arteta, in my opinion. Only team with all 11 players to beat Newcastle at their ground this season. Yeah, I do remember that, Liverpool played Newcastle right before Newcastle were going to play in that Carabao Cup final. And that was the game that Nick Pope stupidly came out and handballed it and did all this nonsense and was sent off. And Liverpool beat them 2-0. And it was a pretty it seemed like a pretty clean performance, but really Newcastle still had chances in that game. I remember it. So Newcastle are not a shit team, and you do have to kind of work every 15 minutes and just kind of like get through the next 15, get through the next 15, get through the next 15. I thought we managed everything really well. We played our game. And one of the most impressive things, I think, from my perspective, from a coaching standpoint, was Arteta said that we couldn't go toe-to-toe with them physically, so we had to do the opposite. So Newcastle, I think what they wanted to do was to press us early to get us nervous and kicking the ball long so that they could win the physical battle and just kind of like get that cycle of like not being able to get the ball and then slowly inch back into our box. And we didn't do that. We tried to play. Every time we got the ball, we tried to play. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But when it did work, we were able to lay a glove on them. And that was really good. And a part of that was having Jorginho in midfield versus maybe Partey, who would have given us more of like an off the ball physical aspect of things. But Jorginho really just, when he got on the ball, he controlled it. He controlled the tempo. He organized. He was good on the day. Like he was my man of the match. There's obviously like comps going around of him getting bypassed in midfield. But again, I think we basically decided that we knew they would run through us in midfield in some aspects, but we would control the game when we had the ball. And so that difference in styles was really like obvious. And I like that Arteta said that, like, we could not beat them physically. So don't try to do what we do best. And some of our playing out from the back under pressure against Newcastle away from home was outstanding. Dane says, big up your channel just from Trinidad and Tobago. Smash the likes, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Fabrizio says, can understand after that J20 performance why Arteta might want Zubimendi. We're going to talk about Zubimendi as well. Matthew says Jorginho interceptions are so good. He reads the game well. He's always going to, miss some of those challenges, and then they're going to be through, and we're going to be kind of running towards our goal with, that nervousness of like, oh my gosh, we just got beat. What's going to happen? But it was kind of like the gamble that Arteta took, and I do think that you know, if they score some of their chances, like maybe the Willock chance and, you know, another one or whatever, maybe we're looking back on that Jorginho performance and not as glowingly, but when you get the 3 points, it works. And I do think that we were never going to beat them physically. So we did need to try to control the game. And he gave us our best chance of doing that for sure. There's 100 of you guys in here. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Ash says, well done, Jess, for not piling onto Kiwior after his debut. He looks so suited for the system. Another great talent ID spot. I mean, you really can't get on to somebody that hasn't played that many minutes. You know, I think we look at players that are young players that come into teams and do really well, and we wonder why they're doing so well. Is because we probably didn't watch the games where they played like shit, you know, but they get the opportunity to play multiple games, like back to back to back to back to back with strong sides, you know, rain or shine, whether they make mistakes or not. And at Arsenal, those chances are more few and far between. We've seen it with Zambi, we've seen it with Vieira, you know, we've seen it with Kiwior. Is, you know, he played against Sporting. He didn't have a great, you know, initial like debut. The whole team was poor on the day, but he didn't help himself either. And he didn't play again until we saw him against, you know, at Anfield, I think. I mean, he might have played like a couple of minutes at the end of like Crystal Palace or Leeds. But, you know, you have to have consistency. And I think maybe him knowing that he would play against Chelsea and then play against Newcastle, your shoulders relax, you know that like, okay, I'm going to get a couple of chances. And so I can do my thing. It also helps when the balance is correct. You have the right players around you. You're not only playing with the Europa League team. We know that players, even quality players, tend to struggle in our Europa League squads when they're playing, you know? So I think there was a lot of different factors from my perspective where I was like, Kiwior is probably fine. We just need to see him play a little bit more, let him make the mistakes and then continue to play him. And he's done a really good job. A lot of people after the Chelsea game were very like, oh, well, the real test is against Newcastle, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. But what you could see from the Chelsea game is he's better than Holding. He's more comparable to William Saliba. He's not the same level as him. They're not the same build, but he's a good sweeper. And that's what we need. We need somebody that can step up, you know, and compress the pitch and make the gap small. And then we need somebody that can kind of play behind Gabriel and sweep up the mess as well. Like, and he did a really good job. He defends big spaces really well. And that's really the difference between him and Rob Holding. It's not really that Rob Holding can't defend. It's just defending in wide areas, defending space, compressing the pitch. He's just recovery. That's not his bag, right? And so Kiwior has been really, really good. And I've seen a lot of people kind of seeing what I'm seeing, where I could see him playing left back for us as well. Like, I think that's a really smart signing from us for sure. Rep 187 says we're the only team to beat 11-man Newcastle. Is very impressive. I think so as well. Dane says that performance from Jorginho makes me just a little bit sad that he has to go, but he and the others got to go in the summer. I mean, if you mean like Jorginho has to go, I don't think Jorginho will leave in the summer. I think he'll run his contract down at Arsenal. But there are some decisions midfield-wise that need to be made. I've said this several times that if Arsenal want to bring in 2 midfielders, which all reports have pretty much said that that's what Arsenal want to do, there's not enough room in the squad, a 25-man squad, to have 8-9 midfielders. It just doesn't work. So somebody is going to leave, and it'll be interesting to see who does. John Wayne says going to be a big turnaround this summer. Less numbers, more quality. Expectation will be high. Cannot wait, but we are not done yet. Quality last night was outstanding. That's the aim. Yeah, speaking a little bit about Real Madrid versus Manchester City. I think that was one of the most high quality matches I've ever watched. Just because it was a difference in styles of play. There were times where Real Madrid was on top, times where it felt like Manchester City were on top, but both teams were able to weather those storms with good defense and a lot of concentration. And it took 2 outstanding goals to concede. And I think, from an Arsenal perspective, we tend to concede quite soft goals, and it doesn't take much, to beat us, especially at home. And so you have to make a team really work for it. And I think if Man City look back on that, they'll say, you know, the kind of performance that Vinny Jr. had to put in, and that move that he made, and that chance that, you know, the ball that he shot, and like the way that he made that goal, they could feel like, okay, that's a goal that we could concede. Do you know what I mean? And that's what it took. It took near perfection from Kevin De Bruyne and Vinny Jr. to score goals, and both teams were majorly focused. And Arsenal have a ways to go, I think, to get to that level. If we had to play against Real Madrid, I think we'd get spanked, just because, not because I think that we don't have quality, but I just think that the game that they play, the dark arts, the concentration, you know, did you see the clip of Rudiger and the way that he was playing against Haaland? He was getting into the mind of Haaland, you know, and Haaland was pretty much a ghost the entire game, just like Benzema. Like, we have a ways to go, you know, and quality and experience will go a long way for Arsenal getting into the in the Champions League next season. But let's go ahead and get into the nitty-gritty of what I wanted to talk about today. We're going to talk about Ramsdale, Zubimendi, and Granit Xhaka. Starting off with Ramsdale, there are reports that he is close to signing a new deal with Arsenal, which is excellent news. Always been a fan of Aaron Ramsdale. If you guys have been on the channel for a while, when we were first linked with him, I feel like on this channel was probably one of the only channels that didn't shit on him right away, just because, you know, the narrative was that he had gotten relegated so many times. And so why would you bring in a relegation level goalkeeper? And my feeling on that was like, I don't know much about goalkeepers. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that, like, I watched a bunch of comps of, you know, Ramsdale and I could see the vision. But one thing that I do think is football is a team game, and you can have a very good goalkeeper that concedes quite a bit of goals because the defense in front of them is just shit. You know what I mean? And I was like, well, if Arsenal are willing to spend 25 million on this guy, then they must see something. And those relegations don't really matter. So we just have to kind of trust, you know, the process, you know, you just have to kind of trust the process. And I think that trusting the process has been paid back and back and back and back, because Aaron Ramsdale is an excellent goalkeeper. The first season, I think we were kind of feeling like, okay, he's not a great shot stopper, but, you know, he's great with his feet. You know, if you remember those passes that he was making into, you know, onto Martinelli's toes, you know, against Manchester City when we played them at home, that was really what stood out. You know, him versus Bernd Leno was, you know, him with the ball at his feet. And people had really just kind of like, he's not a shot stopper, but he's good with his feet. He's an Ederson, whatever, you know. But this season, he's really shown that it's not just what he can do with the ball at his feet. He is an excellent shot stopper. When he's like, a lot of our away performances, I do think they have been saved by Ramsdale, which is what you need, by the way. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a goalkeeper that's saving. You know, that's what they're supposed to do. You know what I mean? And if you think about like some of the saves that he made against Son and Kane, at the Tottenham Stadium or whatever, that was excellent. The save that he made against Bournemouth, you know, that, I mean, surely they should be putting that away, but he made that save. There's so many you can think of. Aaron Ramsdale has been excellent this season. And yeah, he's had the odd moment, like we can probably just name the Southampton situation, whatever. But I think there's way more good than bad with Aaron this season. And he's only 24 years old. And that's another reason why when people are so harsh on him, I'm like, yeah, well, goalkeepers usually don't, you know, hit their prime until 26, 27, 28, 29. And he's well before that. And he's performing to a very high level. And I think he's more than deserved this new contract. So this is from Simon Collings, basically saying Aaron Ramsdale is close to agreeing a new contract with Arsenal. The club have an agreement in principle with Bukayo Saka and are in talks with William Saliba. And dialogue remains open with Reiss Nelson as well. You know, so it's not really set in stone that, you know, Reiss Nelson will leave this summer. And the contract should Ramsdale's current deal expires in the summer of 2026. So he's definitely due a new deal. And I'm just like, this is perfect timing. You know, Aaron Ramsdale is a fucking superstar. He really is. And I hope that moving forward, like we can give players a chance before they actually sign, before it's like give them a chance to like actually play before we just decide. Some of the abuse that Aaron Ramsdale got when he first signed was something that I've never seen before. And there's saying that you're not sure about a signing and being disappointed with it, and then like being in his DM saying don't come to Arsenal. And so hopefully we've kind of learned our lesson with that. But Ramsdale, 25 million, what a fucking steal. I mean, he has been, when we think about players of the season, I do think maybe he's going under the radar a little bit. There's a lot of games that we would have lost if it wasn't for him. The Sheikh AFC says Ramsdale still has some crazy moments that he needs to cut out. Most players that are young do, and that's an obvious statement to make, that a young goalkeeper, stepping up from like relegation level sides to a top 4 team is going to have to really cut out those moments to be able to, for us to say we have a world-class goalkeeper. So yeah, he needs to develop, just like Saka needs to develop, just like Martinelli needs to develop. They all have to develop, but we can see that this guy is a freaking superstar. We really can. There's obviously things that he has to work out, but I think if we're going to hyper focus only on his mistakes and not focus on the good, I do think you'll have a negative view of Aaron Ramsdale. And maybe you didn't want him here to begin with, so you can only focus on the negative. But if you can't look at the positive and the amount of times that he saved us, I don't know what you're watching, because he may have made the mistake against Southampton, but there's a lot of games we would have lost without him. I have to be real, Sin says he's dodgy as hell on corners and dead ball situations in general. I mean, if that were the case, then we would be way lower down the pecking order in terms of, we wouldn't be second. We'd probably be down 5th, 6th, 7th. And if he was as bad as you're saying that he is. And, some of that is the defending in front of him, and you don't have that many clean sheets if you're dodgy, so on all these situations. So I kind of understand, but I do feel like some of this, like bringing up the 1 or 2 things that he needs to fix, is a deflection from the fact that maybe you were wrong about him to begin with. That's all I got to say about that. John Sargent says we need a striker. Okay, so yeah, we need a striker. That's something else. Crispy says Ramsdale, my keeper. I'm definitely on this side of the fence. Like, I'm sorry, but saying Aaron Ramsdale needs to improve is like saying, I need to eat in order to stay alive. Like, come on, everybody needs to improve. And a 24-year-old goalkeeper definitely is not going to be perfect, but he definitely needs to, he's definitely somebody that needs a new deal, because once he hits that peak, he could be England's number 1. And you don't want to lose somebody like that for sure. Prince Tutu says that Ramsdale and Pope masterclass just showed how good Ramsdale is. He edged it on the day and should be England's number 1. Everybody loves Nick Pope and feels like Nick Pope is the shit. But Nick Pope is what is he, 28, 29 years old? He's way older than Aaron Ramsdale. And I've seen him make several mistakes this season, high profile mistakes, that have really cost them in certain circumstances. And he also doesn't have to play with only 2 defenders in front of him. You also take into consideration the way that we play. There's a lot of times where Ramsdale has to make very split-second decisions in order to save our asses. And I think he does it very, very well. He's asked to do so much. Play from the back, sweeper keeper, save our asses when, it's 3v2. He does so much, you guys. Like, he's not perfect, but nobody is. And it's just so obvious to say that he needs to improve. Like, you know what I mean? Monini says, I feel some people are still unconvinced because they didn't believe in him in the first place. I feel like that's very true. And people are like, well, that one mistake he made. I'm like, yeah, but he's done more good than bad, and so many people, I think, just like really did not want him in the beginning and can't live with it. Like, it is what it is, I didn't really want Jorginho at all. Like, I did not want him, but he's proved to be a good signing. Maybe I was probably wrong about that. I think he's been a good signing. Is he exactly what was advertised? Yeah. Experienced player, doesn't have the legs, but good on the ball. But I was very critical of the Jorginho signing, but I'm not going to double down every single time Jorginho has a dodgy moment and say, oh my gosh, like, da 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 da, when I know that he's had more positive moments than good. And I think sometimes we have a difficult time just saying, I might have just been a little bit wrong on that. Adam says, agreed. It's unreasonable to ask a goalkeeper not to make a single mistake, especially the way that we play. I think we play a very high risk, high reward style. And, some of the times it works and sometimes it doesn't. But we ask a lot of Saliba and Gabriel and Ramsdale in particular. And I think they do a really good job of basically saving our asses like that. That's what I call it, saving our asses. Holt says Ramsdale went from 2 Prem relegations to challenging for the Prem title. Isn't that an improvement? I think just in general, like his game, I mean, for him to be identified by Arsenal as the goalkeeper that's going to take us into the future, I think that that's a huge, probably accomplishment for him. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of trust that goes into your goalkeeper. You have to make the right decision. Look at teams that have made bad decisions on goalkeepers. It could really cost you. And so Arsenal, off of the back of a lot of scrutiny and a lot of side eyes, some real big side eyes on why would we be signing a goalkeeper like this? He's been relegated, blah, blah, blah. For him to, go from where he was before to where he is now is a huge improvement career-wise. But I just think from last season to this season, he's improved so much. He went from a goalkeeper that people said was not a good shot stopper. I remember those conversations. Well, we got him because he's good with his feet, but he's not really that good of a shot stopper. So, no, he's an all-arounder, you guys. If he could just get over those moments of like, there's just some moments where I do feel like he has a little bit of like, for the lack of a better expression, maybe a little bit of like ADHD, where he's just like, I want to be involved. And his like being so hyper, sometimes he can make some mistakes, but he's asked to play from the back. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But when it works, damn, it's good. It's really good. Fabrizio says Tottenham are the only team in the Big Six to win the Audi Cup. So, oh yeah, it's weird. Like lately, there's been a lot of like Spurs trolls in the comments or in the chat box, which is great. I love that they waste their time here giving me more views and being annoying because their team is in the mud. Have fun. This is your last season being included in the top 6. You guys have been firmly replaced by Newcastle. Have fun, have fun. Oh, I have to check this really quick, you guys. I'm sorry. It might be important. Oh, okay. Cool. So Holt says every player makes mistakes. They're human. I would just say, like, obviously I think like being critical is not wrong, but sometimes you can feel where the agenda kind of lies. And, with Ramsdale, because there's been more good than bad. Same with Saka, I think the moments where they make mistakes, we can criticize those and kind of put it to bed. And it doesn't have to last for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to the point where they have good games, but we're still trying to make it seem like they're not. But yeah, Ramsdale getting this new deal, I think is perfect. It's something that I didn't expect because, we've been talking so much about Saka and Saliba, but Ramsdale, he's a part of that core. And so we need to make sure that our center backs, our goalkeeper, and our midfielders are all kind of like set in stone for the next, 3-4 years, so I'm very excited about him closing in on that new deal. I feel like, I don't know. I just love Ramsdale so much. I don't know. I just love him so much. He's just great. Yeah, my emails, I get so many emails. I'm one of those people that has like 10,000 emails and they just go, 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 go. I think somebody has me like almost every company has me on like spam, so yeah, it just is what it is. Crispy says, hear me out, guys, but I feel like we need a first team Partey replacement. Midfield is a big conversation for the summer, I'm sure, Thab says, lapse in concentration at times, but the away day focus gene is so valuable. You need players that have the balls to like really be like that guy in away performances. And I even think there were moments against Manchester City where he was kind of like the only one really keeping us in the game. He was one person back there that I was like, at least you showed up. And that's tough, because I don't know. I feel like he has that I'm not afraid to perform in big moments. And we have a couple players like that that have really stood out this season. Ramsdale is one of them. I think Gabriel has done it as well. Ben White has been really consistent. I can only think of maybe 1 or 2 games where I thought he was off. Saka and Martinelli. Martinelli is also a big game player, so that's good. That's really good. We may be taking these kids to the Bernabeu next season, so we need to have big game players on that team sheet. So yeah. There's 170 of you guys in here. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel. Yeah, we'll just block this guy because he's like doing the most. The cow says Kane will run down his contract and come to Arsenal. Okay, you guys are just like going back and forth with it. Fabricio says we need to stop giving away early chances goals, though. It's starting to become a little bit of a habit, it seems. Yeah, that's definitely something that needs to be looked at for sure. But yeah, and obviously like the big names on that report are, Saka and Saliba. Saka's is done. The deal is agreed in principle. He'll be one of our highest earners. And, despite, maybe not having the best couple of games, I do think that some of it has been overblown. I actually don't think he was on rewatch. I thought he was actually pretty good against Newcastle, to be fair. I know that ever since he missed that penalty, there's been a lot of criticism around Bukayo Saka and him needing dropped and all this kind of stuff. But make no bones about it. Getting Saka on a new deal is so, so important because he could be playing for City. The kid is that good. So, and that probably would be the destination of choice, like if he were not to sign a new deal with us. So Saka having the deal agreed in principle is super important for Arsenal. He's our franchise player. He's the face. And also Saliba, Saliba is still in talks. Arteta kind of reassured the journalist the other day that it was just a matter of timing. And, but Saliba was always going to be the most difficult to tie down. Martinelli views Arsenal as his home, and he always has done. Like, he always has. Like, he's always viewed Arsenal as his home. He's always spoken very highly. He signed his new deal before knowing that we qualified for Champions League. That's how much he loves Arsenal. He's damn near Hale End as far as I'm concerned. And then Saka was always going to sign, but obviously he's so talented and he has so many choices that I think he did need to know that we were going to be in Champions League to sign that new deal. But Saliba's different. He is somebody that's definitely going to be tapped up by PSG and Real Madrid. I don't necessarily love his agent that much. I think he's a little bit like, whatever. And so even though I think Saliba obviously wants to stay, and he will, it was always going to take a little bit more time because he's going to ask for more money. We have to be careful with stuff like that. But, signing Saliba, re-signing Saliba is so important because quite frankly, you're not going to be able to sign anybody of his quality for 27 million anymore. That is a steal. Now there are players that aren't even they're not even on his level that are going for 3 times as much as that, so it's cheaper to keep him. I think cheaper to keep him, give him the money, give him the money that he wants, get him on a long-term deal. I do feel like eventually we will end up selling Saliba to a Real Madrid or something like that, but we want to have the opportunity to ask for stupid money when that happens, if and when that happens. But seeing those names, and knowing that there's a feeling around the club that all of them are going to get done makes me feel so much better for the summer, for sure. Let's see. Crispy says, I need Martinelli prop. He's so underrated. He's so underrated, I feel like. But I think he needs Champions League. That's what I think Martinelli needs. I don't think he has that natural, because, Saka's obviously now an England star. So it's different. He's looked at by, people in England as a star, where Martinelli is a little bit different. You know, he's an import. And if he was at Brighton, they'd be kissing his fucking ass right now. Excuse my language, but they would be. They would be kissing his behind if he was at Brighton. But because he's at Arsenal, he's almost like forgotten. And there's even like this account that's on Twitter that only speaks about Brazil. He never speaks about Martinelli. He talks about Rodrigo and Vinicius and all these other people that are in the Brazilian league, but he does not talk about Martinelli. I think he needs Champions League for sure, to get onto that international level where people are actually speaking about him. He needs that because his PR is poor right now. Nobody talks about him, you know. The Onyx Lens says our salary structure is going to be to go nuts next year. It's inevitable, but we better keep up. We cannot miss out on top four. And the comp is going to be so serious. City Pool is back, United and Newcastle. Yeah, I think one of the things that kind of confuses me about Arsenal fans is I feel like we get off on like this feeling like we're doing something because our net spend is so low, or our salary or wage structure is so low. And, you know, look at what we're doing with so little. But, you know, it doesn't mean anything if we're not winning. And I think the difference between us and other teams over the years is that they've paid the right players to come to their club and stay at their club, where, you know, we've either not paid or paid the wrong guys. You know, and so everything kind of needs to work out perfectly, because obviously you can't have a wage structure, you know, and be spending those fees, those agent fees, and be sitting in 6th and 7th. You know, you have to be performing. But I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be paying Saka and Martinelli like they're our best players in, you know, a team fighting for the title, because that's exactly what they are despite their age. You know, so we got the wage bill down so we could build it back up. And I think we have to get comfortable with the fact that when you give these types of wages to players and you pay these types of fees, that there is a return on investment that is a minimum requirement. And so the team that are getting those wages and the manager that has these players available to him need to make that investment worth it. And so there's going to be a lot more pressure on Arsenal with these players coming in, with these players being paid this amount of money, to be performing like a top 4 team for the foreseeable future. And so, yeah, you can't mess it up, but I'd rather us go for it than sit around in 6th or 7th and say, but the wage structure is low. Like, we're not Leicester, you know, we're not Brighton, you know, that's not who we are. We're Arsenal. And so we need to just get with it. For sure. We just need to get with it. Denver says, I don't care. The Cronkies paid the bag to Jokic to keep him at the Nuggets. No excuses. Big players demand big money. That's just the requirement. Ash, thank you so much for your super chat. Says tracking for 90 points, same as Invincibles. We're top. This team's also scored like 10 more goals than the Invincibles so far, and the season isn't even over, you know. So that just shows how the level has really went up in the Premier League, in terms of, like, we know, like, data and, you know, all that kind of stuff has really made the, like, athletes now are better than athletes were 10 years ago. We know that. But also how good this team is, you know, because they're keeping up with a team that has everything at their disposal. They have the best manager in the world. They have the best players in the world. They have the best, board. They have the best, like, owners. They have the best everything. And we're, at least in the league, keeping up with them, which is great. Sin says, for a club that changed the transfer game, it's trash, to be honest. For a club that changed the transfer game, it's trash, to be honest. I don't know what you're talking about. Give me some background to what you're talking about. A cow says Saliba is not going anywhere. He's built a gym at home. I don't think he's going to go anywhere now, but, like, Saliba will eventually play for Real Madrid. I've come to peace with it. You know, I've come to grips with that fact. I think if he is the guy that we think he is, he will eventually play for Real Madrid. Most, you know, players of that level end up playing for that club, you know. Crispy says the Champions League, Martinelli, I need that. Exactly. Diallo says Jared Bowen said he looks up to Saka. In my humble opinion, Martinelli is on the same level, top class. That's so cute. Oh, Jared Bowen, that's adorable. Even like when I like see like the little pictures and stuff of like Saka and the videos of Saka like at England, he looks like he's that guy. Like he really does. Like I know I'm like he has like little minions, like he has like little Stans and sons. Like Luke Shaw like just walks behind Saka all day and like, he's like his little fan. It's really cute. Um let's see. So yeah, I think Ramsdale, Saka, Saliba, that's great. So we've kind of talked about the new deal. So let's chat a little bit about Zubimendi, a player that was heavily linked to Arsenal in January. Obviously, like the rumor was we wanted to do the release clause, and then we ended up not doing it because he wanted to stay at Real Sociedad. And so then there was a report a week ago that said that he was close to signing for Arsenal. But that report was actually coming from somebody that's very close to Barcelona. Things get mixed in translation, and it was more of him assuming, based on past reports, that he would be closer to Arsenal than Barcelona. Barcelona is said to be out of the race for Zubimendi because the financial aspects of things, like they would want the release clause. The release clause is like 53 million or something like that, and Barcelona cannot afford that. This just feels like a lot of like just BS to me. Like Barcelona are losing Busquets. Like today it was announced that he's done, like he's leaving Barcelona in the summer. So they have to replace that player in their team because I don't think it's Frankie de Jong, and they don't have that player naturally in their squad. And also Barcelona and Real Madrid can't really afford to let the best and brightest talent, especially Spanish talent, to leave that league and end up in the Premier League. And so I do think there's an aspect of Barcelona kind of putting it out there that we don't have the money, but we want him. And I would imagine that that's the player that they would want to replace Busquets, because he's also seen as Xavi's ideal choice. And so even though he's linked to Arsenal, I'm not sure that the links are that firm for us in the summer. So Zubimendi also spoke to Marca today about the Barcelona and Arsenal links, and this is what he said. He said, "I've never said I want to leave. All the news makes me uncomfortable. Sociedad is my home, and I'm happy to continue growing here. Staying here is the best thing I can do. It's very nice to be at home and compete at the highest level. It is also very nice to renew and see other colleagues renew as well, because I believe in this project." And so Zubimendi for me is somebody who's basically saying that he doesn't really see himself going anywhere. And I do feel like if he was to leave, it would be to go to Barcelona, because I mean, that's just what they all kind of like do, right? Sociedad are also in the top 4 of the La Liga. So, from his perspective, he might also feel like, they'll play Champions League. So what's the point? Like I could be at my home club where I feel comfortable and I won't go anywhere. And it is what it is, I feel like we can kind of put this one to rest a little bit. Zubimendi looks like the perfect number 6 from an Arsenal perspective, an Arteta perspective, because of the way that he plays. He's more of a Jorginho than a Caicedo. But if he doesn't want to leave, then it is what it is, and we don't want any Lucas Torreira crying, about not being at the place that he wants to be at, homesick and shit, so it is what it is. But he said he never really planned on leaving Real Sociedad. He's always said it. He loves his life, his home, and he's happy there. So, F him. I don't think he's going to come to Arsenal. I think we can kind of write him off the list. And if he does go somewhere, it'll probably be in Barcelona, because go to Barcelona because he doesn't have to leave that sunny weather, So like Crispy is saying, it's probably down to Caicedo or Rice. Which I'm perfectly fine with, because basically you're getting somebody that's Premier League proven, somebody that can play in this league, that's not going to be scared, to be in the cold and dreary weather, having to go to fucking Burnley, because we have to go back to that place again. We have to go back to Turf Moor again, so I don't think he's gonna come to us, which is fine. Ash says, "What midfielder would you bring in along with Rice and Caicedo?" Doubt we get both. So, obviously the Rice news is on fire, it really is. And There's reports coming from Dean Jones this morning saying that, Rice has said to people around him that his priority is Arsenal. I do think Arsenal have done quite a bit of groundwork in terms of, he was at Gabriel Jesus's freaking birthday party. Like, they're really trying to get him to Arsenal. And I think, it's really going to come down to whether or not Arsenal are willing to pay the fee and whether they make this into another Mudryk situation where, they're haggling over a couple of dollars here and there, payment structure, and then another team comes in and decides, actually we're going to pay more up front and, bam. And then we can't, West Ham are already putting it out there that they want 120 million. That feels like posturing to me, but they're not going to be easy to deal with. This is their marquee player. Enzo just was sold to Chelsea for 130 million. So it's not going to just be quick. And so Arsenal kind of have to be willing to do the business. And if they're not, somebody else will swoop in and get him. Obviously, Chelsea are interested in him as well as Manchester City and Manchester United. So there's a queue, and it looks like from a Declan Rice perspective, we're the place that he wants to be, we're his priority. But Arsenal is also Mudryk's priority. And we know when a player is ready to leave, and if the club that they're at is not willing to accept, the fee and whatever the club that they want to go to is offering, they will go somewhere else to get out of there. So that's the only thing that worries me, is just Arsenal have not usually been the type of team to just say, here's the money, now give me the player. We usually do a bit of haggling, a little bit of, cat and mouse. And I just think Declan Rice is going to have too many suitors for us to really be playing those types of games. Because a player is only really loyal to you until it's either stay where they're at or go to a different club. Do you know what I mean? So it looks like either Rice or Caicedo. And there are also reports that came out today that Caicedo's price is 80 million. So we were willing to spend the 70 million in January. If we were to tack on an additional 10, we could get Caicedo as well, so it won't be both. It was never going to be both. Both doesn't even make sense considering the profile of both players. They're both CDMs, they're both more defensive minded. They're different, but they're both more defensive minded. So it'll be one or the other. And hopefully Arsenal get their number one choice in Declan Rice. But if we don't and we get Caicedo, that's not bad either. Let's see. Musto says Declan Rice, 120 million. Get him. He's definitely not like worth 120 million, but like most players aren't really worth what they go for. The market is inflated. It's crazy right now. Players like Anthony are going for like 80 something million. Enzo is nowhere near an 130 million pound player. It just is not that, so we're not going to pay what he's probably worth, which is probably like 50, 60. It is what it is, Munini says, why are we hell-bent on Rice? Has anyone seen Caicedo play levels? I'd pay the 80 million in a heartbeat. I don't know if it's levels. I think everything that Brighton does right now is totally like, everybody just thinks like that's just it. Anything you get from Brighton is going to bang because look how great they are. And I do think there's a little bit of like, I've seen people say, well, why would we buy Rice? He's been in a relegation battle. No player that's in a relegation battle is worth 120 million. But again, feels like we haven't really learned, from the situation with, Ramsdale. It wasn't too long ago where, West Ham were finishing above us, or they were finishing around us, so even though they were in a relegation scrap this season, West Ham are nowhere near a team that should be on the second page. They should definitely be in the top 10 for sure with the level of talent that they have in their team, but with Rice, I just think it's the fact that he can play more advanced and he can play in the 6th role. I'm not sure that Caicedo can play more advanced. I think he is mostly defensive, but he can play right back as we've seen, so that there's a plus side there. But, Declan Rice is more experienced, and he also has that leadership aspect of his game, which I know a lot of Arsenal fans don't really care about soft factors, but it makes a difference, when you bring in a captain, somebody that's willing to take ownership and leadership. I don't necessarily see that from Caicedo. I see him kind of like as a really talented player, but do I think he's going to drag his team over the line? No, but I think Declan Rice will. So I think Arteta is probably looking at that as well, that he just fits the project, I think, in terms of leadership, age-wise, been in the league, can play multiple positions, can improve. And I think that's why Arsenal are hell-bent on him versus Caicedo, which I don't think that Declan Rice is like so clear of him, but I do think there's some factors that make him a little bit more attractive. Acal says, don't forget Rice's physical attributes. I mean, he can cover ground. He's 6 foot, so you don't lose the height in midfield, which I don't think you want to lose right now. Like, even though Xhaka and Partey struggle a little bit in terms of covering ground, they're not small players, so that really helps. He can also drop into center back. Like, there's a lot of plus sides to Rice, and he's not the best to watch. I don't think that he's as smooth as other players that you may want in that position. Like, he's not as smooth as Thomas Partey, like when Partey is doing his thing, but he's effective. And if you watched him against Manchester United, he was outstanding. I really do think that people are sleeping on Rice because we have this feeling like he's English, so he's being overhyped. But the guy is quality. I mean, even Pep Guardiola said it, and Pep Guardiola knows players. Like, he knows players, So we'll see. Matt says, I don't think we'll get Rice. I think West Ham will hold out for a fee they want, and he won't, we won't do that fee. That's a real possibility, for sure. Let's see. Ash says, Rice and Caicedo, I'd just be happy with either. I definitely think it's either or. Andrew says Caicedo is better player than Rice. He's stronger on the ball and better passer. I don't know if I necessarily believe this 100%. Also have to remember that Caicedo plays in a system that's closer to ours, and Rice could not be playing for a more pragmatic manager. In fact, for his national team and in club career, he plays for two very pragmatic managers that tend to be a little bit more defensive than anything. And I think you see a lot more of Caicedo's abilities on the ball than you see Rice's, because he's told to be more conservative. But if you watch like his overall game, there's times where he line splitting passes, balls in behind the back line, big switches from left to right. Rice does also have a pretty decent passing range as well. So I think we see more of it from Caicedo. And also, I do think there's a lot of hype around Brighton too. Like, every player that they have, people are just like, oh my God, and Ciso. And it's just like, come on now. Like, they're good, but like, come on. Yo-Yo says Rice needs less development than Caicedo. I just see Caicedo as a very good young player that would do a really good job at Arsenal. But when you look at what we're looking for, like a starter that can play in the 6 role or also maybe even the 8 role, I think he fits. Because I'm also going to tell you guys the truth. Like, Arsenal may be looking for 2 midfielders, but there might be we might not get 2 because of how expensive Declan Rice would be. And if you're going to have to pay 80 million plus for a midfielder, they better be able to play 2 positions. They better be able to do more than one thing. And we know that Declan Rice can do that. And like Yo-Yo is saying, he's also further down in his progression. I think people forget, like, Caicedo's like 20. So yeah, I think both of them are so talented, but Rice to me just makes more sense. Morgan says, hi, Jess. I don't think Arsenal are going to pay what West Ham are asking. Unless they come down, like, we're not getting him. Like, we're not going to spend 120 million. I think we'll spend around 80, 90, so they have to come down a little bit, but maybe with add-ons, we'll see. We'll definitely see. This could really just end up being a saga, and I'm not up for another saga. So, let's see. Life of BOJ says Rice has the attributes for the 6 and the 8. Look at what he's been asked, what's being asked of our current players, not what you're only seeing at West Ham. Rice is an excellent fit. I agree with that. I think we get too bogged down in like, oh, well, we don't see it at West Ham, so it's not there. I feel like I've seen Rice do so much more than, I feel like he has a lot of capabilities that don't necessarily get showcased on a regular basis. Like if he plays for Arsenal, he's going to have more possession. West Ham are not a possession-based team. So what he can do with the limited possession that he has at West Ham, just imagine what he could do if he has the ball all the time, So I think he's an excellent fit. But I understand that when you watch Caicedo in a more progressive system, playing for a team that plays more similarly to us, he stands out more. And he's also just very, very hyped. Like, that's the truth. He's just very, very hyped, like everything else that Brighton does. Everything that they touch is like, that's the shit. They're the best. It's it. Oh, look at that. And I'm just like, there's more to life than what Brighton's offering. Do you know what I mean? Ash says, if we want to compete with City every year, we have to get used to writing our checks in the 80 million plus. If we don't, we're going to have to break our transfer record, and are Arsenal willing to do that? I think they were willing to do that in January. They definitely will be willing to do it this summer, but will it be enough? Because there's going to be, now that Jude is gone, and McAllister also looks like he might be going to Liverpool, there's going to be quite a few teams that are like, okay, we need to get a really good player that could play 6, maybe 8. And it's unfortunate, but I think Man City might be one of the teams looking for a player like that, losing Gundogan, not getting Jude Bellingham because they were in for him and he chose to go to Real Madrid. So yeah, it could be, yeah, a little bit brutal. If Arsenal are not willing to spend the money, it could really just be like egg on the face, Yo-Yo says Arsenal were prepared to go around 90 million in Jan for Mudryk. Arsenal will be prepared to go around 100 million this summer on a player. And this is why, I do think we'll be willing to go to a certain amount, but hopefully, West Ham are willing to negotiate a little bit down, because 120 is different than 100 million. That's an additional 20 million. Maybe that could be used in add-ons, but, I have a hard time seeing Arsenal get into the 120 million pound range for Declan Rice. I really do. But that's also why I feel like it might just be one midfielder. And if it ends up just being one midfielder, because you still have to get a center back, you might need another fullback, there's other things, like you still need an attacker as well, that you need to get a midfielder that can play in multiple positions. And Rice can do that for sure. Let's see. Prime on Reese says, Rice ain't Xavi Alonso, chill with the 8 talk. He is a 6 all day long. But wasn't Xavi Alonso a number 6 that sat at the base of midfield? Am I wrong about that? Wasn't Xavi Alonso more of an Arteta or, one of those that kind of sat at the base and played number 6? I don't remember Xavi Alonso being an 8, or maybe I'm getting that completely wrong, but he can play number 8. If Xhaka can play number 8, so can Declan Rice. He's more talented than Xhaka. So that's interesting that you don't think he can play number 8, especially for Arsenal, the way that is being played now. Steve says, why go to City if you don't know where they stand? They might be in 2nd division next year or the year after, because players don't give a shit about that. They first of all, City are not going down for anything. I have to be honest. City are not going down for anything. So we can forget about them going into the championship or lower. They're going to be there. They'll pay their way out of it. Come on. Lucas says Alonso was a deep line playmaker. Exactly. I do think he played at the base of midfield and was a little bit more of a facilitator type. So I'm not real. That's a poor example. But if you're basically saying he can't play number 8, I hear you, but I think he can. He also thinks he can, because I've seen quotes of him saying that he feels like he can do it. Ash says, I'm sure City will buy their way out of their trouble. They'll get a points reduction at the best. Exactly. Thob says, I think Caicedo would suit 8 better. I don't see any goal scoring ability from Moises Caicedo. And so he has kind of a similar feel, the feeling that I get around Caicedo is very similar to the feeling that I got around Sambi, is that he can play 8, but he's not going to give you goals and assists, where that kind of position you need that. That's what Xhaka was challenged with. He needed to start scoring goals and getting assists, get into those advanced areas, and make that happen. And I see Caicedo in that same kind of thing as Sambi, where it's he could play 8, but it's an odd fit based on the way that we play with our 8s. So, he'd be more suited in a double pivot or at the base of, as a 6. But Declan Rice is somebody that I can see him get into the final third. And when he does, he tends to look quite comfortable in the final third. He takes shots, he can put in a nice ball, like he can do those types of things. So actually don't see Caicedo as an 8. I see him very much so in the base of midfield, either in the double pivot or as a 6. Lucas says Rice is an elite ball carrier. Caicedo is more of a short passer like our current midfield. And that's definitely something that we miss in midfield is a ball carrier. We don't have, and don't talk to me about ESR. Like, I'm not talking about ESR. I'm talking about somebody from deep that is comfortable on the ball and can progress it in large spaces. I think we definitely missed that. There were points in yesterday's game where it's very difficult to break the lines against Manchester City because they're so organized. But one of the things that Real Madrid were able to do is break lines with Vinicius did it a couple times. Fede Valverde did it a couple times. Camavinga did it a couple times where they just got it and dribbled with it. And either they got fouled or, they broke the line and Rodri got passed or whatever. And we don't really have anybody in our midfield that can do that. I know that, Odegaard progresses the ball, but he's definitely not somebody that's going to get it with power and pace and dribble by you. Xhaka is not going to do that. Partey doesn't do it that often, so we're missing that profile and we need it for sure. Let's see. Diallo says Uncle Righty is doing the groundwork on Declan. Plus, the player seems genuinely in love with Arsenal. It all comes down to West Ham and the money involved. I agree with you 110%. It's about the money at this point. I think we've done everything that we can to get him desperate to come to Arsenal. But again, Mudryk was also super desperate to come to Arsenal. And we know that it's all about the money. It's all about the fee. And if Arsenal want to do it, they need to go ahead and get it done. You don't want the likes of Manchester United, Man City, Chelsea, teams that will spend 100 and something million to come into it and take him away. Yo-Yo says dribbling is a cheat code in the game of football. We don't have enough dribblers. And I think that's also why Arsenal will probably look for an attacker that can dribble. Not that Saka and Martinelli are terrible dribblers, but, it really is like Yo-Yo is saying, like a cheat code. It gives you something a little bit different and can get you out of really difficult scenarios. And the fact that we went for Mudryk and one of he has 2 key skills is his dribbling, his ability to beat people one-on-one, and his speed. Arsenal need an attacker that has those attributes. And I think that's why we're linked with Moussa Diaby for sure. There's 213 of you guys in here. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. So no Zubimendi, but it could be either Rice or Caicedo. And I think, most reports have said, for sure, 1 midfielder, 1 attacker, 1 defender. And depending on, who's available and stuff like that, I do think like those are the 3 positions that we'll look at first, get those done. And then with sales, maybe we'll go in for another midfielder and another defender potentially, because I think Arsenal need a center back and maybe a full back, but they might have to choose one or the other, depending on what the money is looking like. So yeah. Oh yeah. Diallo saying, come to think of it, Newcastle won't kick us like that. And the ref does nothing. If Declan was on the pitch, we need those soft factors. That's another thing is like, I'm down for getting as many, English players as possible because I feel like you get more from the refs, but that's just me. But let's talk a little bit about Xhaka. This is definitely something that, I've been talking about a lot lately, is the fact that if Arsenal were to bring in 2 midfielders, which they may or may not, but if they were, and you have Vieira, Emile Smith-Rowe, Xhaka, Partey, Jorginho, Elneny, who I don't actually think will be there really, and then you have Odegaard, there's a lot of midfielders there. That's like 8, 9 midfielders. That's a lot, right? And so there are chances that people are going to go. I do think that there'll be 1 big midfield outgoing. And I was thinking it's either Partey, Emile Smith-Rowe, or Xhaka. I think the only players that I feel like for sure will be there are Jorginho, because he just signed. He has no reason to leave. He's getting paid nicely by Arsenal for a squad role. He can replace Elneny. I think Elneny will go. He'll replace El Neni in the squad, and then he'll go for a free next summer. So Jorginho will stay, Odegaard will stay, and I think Vieira will stay. I know a lot of people don't like Vieira, but Arteta loves him. There was a moment where Vieira was, getting looks in front of Xhaka, and like, so I think he'll be fine. And then, you have Xhaka and Partey, two players that are like so important to the team right now and are senior players, and you would love for them to just drop to the bench, but it's not always that simple. Selfishly, we would want those two players to, if they were placed in the starting lineup, to just drop down to the bench. But, are they really squad players? Is that really what they want to do? Is there an opportunity to move one of them on? I think that one of them definitely could go, or Emile Smith-Rowe, because we know that he's not really a natural fit at the moment for any of the positions. Like, he's definitely not going to play at the base as an 8/10 in those positions that Odegaard and Xhaka take up currently. He doesn't really fill it out well. He's still kind of like a number 10 / a winger. And if we bring in Diaby with Trossard already being there, there's not going to be much wing space for him either. So it could be Emile Smith-Rowe, it could be Xhaka, it could be Partey. And so the links to Xhaka potentially leaving really kind of perked my ear up, because I was like, I feel like this is an interesting conversation from an Arsenal perspective, because he's somebody that I think if this rumor had come out, off of the back of the Man City game, people would be a little bit more open to it. But because he had that stellar game against Newcastle, now people are like, we absolutely cannot sell Xhaka without any, no, he has to stay. He's worked so hard to help us get into Champions League, and there's just no way that he would want to go now. But Xhaka has tried to leave Arsenal like 3 times. He really has. And even though things have turned around with the fans, he's 30 years old or something like that, captain of Switzerland. He's somebody that I wonder if he would be open to the squad role. If we were to bring in somebody that could play that A position and would be a starter, would he be open to like playing a more background role? Is that really Xhaka's personality? I question that. There are reports today that his family wants to go back to Germany, which I don't think anybody really takes that into consideration. Sometimes people just want to go home. They want to finish out their career where they started. Plenty of players do that. And then there's the other aspect of leave on a high. It's his best ever season, but is it going to get any better than this? Maybe not. And he's not really a natural fit for any of the positions that we have. He's not going to play number 6. And as a number 8, as well as he's done, I still am not quite sure that that's, I want Xhaka playing in that position, because I do feel like it's still kind of like an awkward fit, despite him trying so hard to make it work, which has been relatively successful. So it's interesting, because we could recoup about 15 million for him. And, would you rather do that or let him run his contract down? I don't know. But I think if Arsenal, which the reports have said, if Xhaka wants to go, Arsenal will facilitate it and let him go. I think that's respectable. He's been here for 8 years or so. Like, if he wants to go, like, you should facilitate that and let him go. I think he's done such a good job. He's been a soldier for so long. He's endured so much at the club that if he wants to go back home and just finish out his career in Germany, you should allow him to do it. And we should feel confident enough in our recruitment and the players that we have currently to feel like we can live without him, and I do think there's a world where Xhaka goes and we're fine, but I understand the anxiety from Arsenal fans, like the way that people, I thought, overreacted to the Patino news and are reacting to this is we have this fear of missing out, or like fear of losing players, and we just want to stockpile everybody. But there's a world where players move on and we're fine. And yeah, Xhaka, he does feel like almost like a load-bearing wall right now, because if he's not playing, it doesn't seem like we have that same clicking. But you also have to remember that Xhaka, Partey, and Odegaard have played with each other for 2 seasons straight. And so anybody else coming in there might struggle a little bit. And so they have to have the time and the pathway to like actually play that position without us just, okay, we'll bring Xhaka back in, so I think it's interesting. I really do. Because although, I'd be okay with him staying, I also would be okay with him going, because I think Arsenal are going to recruit just fine. Yo-Yo says, the quicker we move on from Xhaka, the quicker we evolve. People ignore the improvements the team has had with Partey and then Zen taking on his previous responsibilities. Can't wait for Arteta to grow. And Bayer Leverkusen is the team that are wanting to bring in Granit Xhaka, by the way. EK says, we already needed an attacking 8 to rotate with Xhaka, so if he leaves, surely we need 2 then, no. But here's the thing, regardless to how some people feel about Vieira, we've spent 40 million on him. He's not going anywhere. And so you have Emile Smith-Rowe and you have Vieira that are 2 young players that can play in those 8 positions, but you need to stop reverting back to Xhaka and give them time to actually. The thing about Arsenal is like we're in such like a weird position where it's like Xhaka's, like I said, like a load-bearing wallet, almost like a crutch in a way, where of course we play better with him because he's a professional, he knows what he's doing, and he works really well with Xhaka or with Partey and Odegaard. And so when we remove him and bring in anybody else and it's not an immediate fit or it doesn't work out perfectly on the first try, we want to get rid of it so quickly and not give it another opportunity. And that's pretty much what people did with Kiwior. It didn't work out right away when he played with Saliba against Sporting. And so people decided he needed a loan or he needed to be sold or he couldn't be trusted. But it wasn't until he played a couple of games in a row. Now he's fine, right? And I think Emile Smith-Rowe and Vieira deserve those opportunities. Like they're the future of this team. They're the future of that position. Emile Smith-Rowe was given a new contract. He's been given the number 10. I think, maybe he does deserve another opportunity to try to play the number 8 role. And Vieira was bought very expensively to play that role as well. So, I think there are players that can play in that position if we bring in one midfielder. I don't think we need to bring in 2, but I also think Arsenal fans need to get comfortable with having other players play in those positions, it not working out right away, but not being like about to die, and want to get rid of those players because it wasn't an immediate fit. I think some of the reason why it doesn't work right now to have 2 lightweight 8s in Odegaard and like Vieira or Odegaard and Emile Smith-Rowe is because the number 6 is not right. I think Thomas Partey has done an excellent job, but you need somebody that's more of a one-man midfielder in there that can do a lot of the heavy lifting. And I think Partey needs Xhaka just as much as Xhaka needs Partey. They're almost like a combination. They have to work together. If Partey doesn't have Xhaka, he struggles. If Xhaka doesn't have Partey, he struggles. You know what I mean? And so you need a one-man wrecking ball. You need one guy that can do the intercepting, the tracking, covering big spaces, all that, and facilitate a platform for 2 lighter weight 8s to play in those positions, So I do think we're fine on 8s. If you were to bring in, Rice and we blew it all on that one midfielder, and then you let Vieira and ESR learn that position, they can't be perfect at it without actually learning it. Xhaka was not great at it when he first started, and he's been around for a long time. So Saida says, isn't Bayer Leverkusen the club Xabi Alonso is managing? Yes, he is. And Arteta and Xabi Alonso are fucking besties. So it's interesting. I'm not surprised that they'd both be interested in it, that they both would like Xhaka. Crispy says, if Vieira can improve his physicality this summer, I have hope. Otherwise, I'm worried. I hear that. Frederick says 4 Arsenal players have double-digit goals this season. I believe Saka, Odegaard, Martinelli, and Gabriel Jesus. The Onyx Lens says, I'm not surprised by ESR not playing much. He's Odegaard's backup. He's going to struggle getting time unless MO is out. Concrete Jungle says Edu needs to give Mikel his first choice targets. Ivy says, so it will be Rice and Partey should Xhaka leave. I mean, you have Jorginho and you have Partey. And so it's one of those where, you have Jorginho that can do the role. You have Partey. They're both quite experienced, so Rice, I feel like naturally would play the 8 role because you can't have the 2 of them on the bench. I think, one of them would be playing and then Rice would play the 8, but also like Rice could play the 6. So I don't know, but that's something we've yet to figure out really, is what position Rice is really coming in for. It could very well be both. But I do kind of like just feel like, Emile Smith-Rowe and Vieira can both play those positions, but they need time to adapt to it and get up to speed. And with Xhaka there, he's kind of like a crutch. And so sometimes you have to take that away so that people can grow into those positions. And sometimes when you do that, it's a little bit messy. But they both are more equipped to be attacking eights than Xhaka ever will be, so maybe they just deserve a little bit more of a chance there. And if we can't have them out there on the pitch, or, it's a high, stakes game or something, then you play Rice and Partey, So yeah, Prime Henri says, if it's Rice and Partey next season, I don't want to hear none of you complaining about how average he is on the ball. I don't know what that means. Yo-Yo says, or Kiwi, Tommy, left back, so Zin can stay in the midfield ahead of Rice. Yeah, exactly. Like, that's definitely something that we've spoken about on this channel, is that my feeling on Kiwi is that he'll play left back next season, or Tomiyasu will play there. Zinchenko's role will be reduced because, I mean, when we originally were looking for a left back, we went for Lisandro Martinez, who's an excellent defender. Zinchenko is not that, but I think Arteta kind of was like, okay, this is somebody that I trust. He can play that inverted role. It's a little bit risky, but we'll just make it work, right? And we got really lucky with Saliba and Gabriel that they're really able to kind of like manage the back line all by themselves, but next season, things are going to change. And so if we go with that bigger back line like we had against Liverpool at home, I think, Kiwior, who's played defensive midfielder, that's also quick and defend in big spaces, can play higher up and kind of play next to Partey or play next to the CDM. And then Rice or whoever's playing the 8, whether it's ESR, Vieira, Odegaard, whatever, they're attacking players, and I think we'll have less of a problem having lighter weight 8s if we're kind of in that 2-2-6 situation. You just imagine it with me, Saliba, Gabriel 2, Kiwior / Tomiyasu and Partey 2, and then White, Rice, Odegaard, whoever, all those guys up front. So yeah. Afsar Gunner says, what happens to Pepe? He doesn't come back. That's what I know. I think we'll cancel his contract. I don't think there's going to be like a last dance with Pepe. I think he's done for sure, you guys. Let's see. Yo-Yo says the manager needs to develop not only the squad. That's why I want Xhaka to leave. He's, like I said, like he's a little bit of a crutch right now. I do think that there's this thing where like we can't live without him. Like he has to be out there. But I just feel like if you change a little bit of something in the back line, give us a little bit more of height and athleticism in that left back position, you could play with lighter weight 8s. You could, and then Partey can have a little bit more, because with Partey right now, he has to do so much. He has to manage so much of the space because Zinchenko doesn't do any of that. And it's strenuous on him. You can tell that, like, if he's not 100%, he can't do it, so having a different left back could help him, which also helps us be able to move players forward and play with lighter weight 8s. Like, it's, I don't think it's that deep, really. Dale says there were 2 crucial tackles in Newcastle game in our box Vieira and ESR won't make unless defense improves. We need a box-to-box in the left 8 Rice. I don't know if I really, like, I think that's like in a once, in a lifetime thing against Newcastle, to be honest. Like, how many times has Xhaka done that? Like, it's not like something he does on a regular basis, so I think I would kind of be a little bit like, I'm a little bit reluctant to over-index, 1 or 2 tackles against Newcastle in one game versus what I know from Xhaka, which is he's a player that's, really good and adapted to that role. But Arsenal could definitely go to another level, and I don't believe we can't play with Vieira, ESR, Odegaard as our 8s. I just think we need a different left back, and I think we just need to grow up a little bit. That's really the truth of it. Xhaka doing that tackle, like, can you name him doing that a couple more times? It's not something he does on a regular basis, so it just is what it is. Kevy Kev says Zinni should play center mid. Only better left backs are available. I think he'll still play left back for us. Like, there'll be games where we need more possession. He'll offer us something different. And I think what Arsenal fans want is they want whatever's different to what we have right now if it's not working. But you still need that option. I think you'll still need the Zinchenko option, even if you play with Tomiyasu or Kiwior at left back. Even if you have Partey as your CDM, sometimes you want the Jorginho option because it works. Different horses for different courses. Maybe, you want to play Rice at the 6, but you need more attacking 8s that are a little bit better in the final third. So you play a Vieira or ESR instead of him there. And that's why people really want a bigger center forward, but that doesn't mean we don't need Jesus at all. I think it's just about having options that give you that, variety versus like Zinchenko can never play left back for us because he's in bad form, I think he's been too good for us to be like, just can't use him anymore. So yeah. Oh, Thab says, oh, wow, I never thought about 4 CBs at the back with Zinchenko 8. I feel like we'll suffer midfield duels. I think Zinchenko is becoming more and more redundant. Well, I don't think Zinchenko needs to play the 8. I just think sometimes you play with Tomiyasu. Like, we did that against Liverpool. And I feel like if Tomiyasu had not gotten injured when he did, we would have had the option to go to Anfield with Tomiyasu as our left back. We would have had the option, to play in some of those games where defensively we may have been a little bit really like once Saliba went down, we needed more structure. We needed more of like a traditional back four, more defensive, solidity. And Tomiyasu gives you that. And we just haven't had that option because he has been injured, but Kiwior can play that position. Tommy, when he's back from injury, can play that position. And I don't think that means the end of Zinchenko. There'll be games where we need more possession. Maybe we're behind. Maybe we're playing against a deep block. That's where Zinchenko is so good for us. But when you're playing against the Newcastles, you're playing against the Liverpools, the big, strong, athletic teams, when we're playing in Europe, that's where Zinchenko kind of lets himself down, so you need a different option. But I don't think Zinchenko is done at Arsenal. You'll need a Zinchenko at some point. But Kyle Saka fan says, I think Zinchenko would be phenomenal in a back 3, back 5 system where someone like Kieran Tierney is a left back and Zinni plays as a wing back. Yo-Yo said, people saw the jump in the team when Partey became the conductor and when Zinchenko became the partner in CM. We're going to explode when Xhaka is upgraded in midfield for the third and final time. I agree with you so much, Yo-Yo. I really do think we are not limiting ourselves, but I do think there's a ceiling to the midfield that we have right now. And I just am not really under this impression that we can never play with Odegaard plus Vieira and ESR. And quite frankly, like Arteta's tried it several times, and I don't think it's the last time we'll see it, to be honest. I think, there have been moments where we played with those, more lightweight 8s and it was fine. And sometimes it wasn't. I just don't think the team was ready for it, but it's going to come back. It's not going anywhere, So yeah, it's not going anywhere. Steve says, when Saliba went down, so did the title, no replacement. Andrew says, if Vieira cannot add a bit of muscle weight this offseason, then I immediately began thinking he was a mistake. Just 8 to 10 pounds more of added physical, please. I'm not going to do the Vieira thing today because I think, people just expect players to just step in, and young players that he didn't really have that much first team experience. So he was always a project, and they just expected him to not start ever. And then every time we seen him start, be the answer. And like, that's just not how football works. You need consistency. You need to continue to start. You need to have more time. And I think there's moments where Vieira's done really well. And I think there's moments where he's been poor. And a lot of the times when he was poor, I also thought the rest of the midfield was poor. I thought the rest of the defense was poor. I thought everybody was poor. But he tends to be the one that people really focus on. I think it's because we spent a lot of money on him, and people wanted to see Tielemans or Paqueta or somebody like that come in, and we bought him instead. But if you've listened to the way that Arteta speaks about Vieira, he's spoken about him quite similarly to the way that he's spoken about Kiwior, where these two players are going to change how we play. They have attributes that the other players don't. And so they're players for the future that are very much so Arteta signings. So, get used to it. Like, they're not going anywhere. They're really not. And there was a moment in time where Vieira was just about to play more minutes, but the 2 times that he started, especially like closer down into the run-in or closer to the run-in, I think we're unlucky. Like, against Southampton, we were down 1-0 early and everybody was kind of like shook after that. And then against Bournemouth, we also went down 1-0 early in like the 9th second. So, yeah, I will keep my Vieira stocks because I feel like they'll come back handy, and I don't think he's going to go anywhere, to be honest. Lucas says we need attacking 8 to make that next step with Rice and Kiwior at left back. They will be better shielded. When we tried this before, we often had El Neni and Tierney. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, is that if the foundation is not there behind those lighter weight 8s, then it doesn't work, and yeah, that doesn't relinquish them from any defensive responsibility, but you have to, whatever Xhaka is adding defensively, especially like when he's playing like more of that box-to-box role, you have to add that somewhere else. And I think we haven't necessarily done that because we've had like Zinchenko in there. And if Thomas Partey is not at 100%, he really struggles being the only defensive player in midfield. Again, he does really well with Xhaka. He can't do it by himself. So the 6 needs to change, I think, in some circumstances. And then the left back needs to change. Then you have the platform to play with lighter weight players. But also, like, Odegaard's physicality has went up significantly since he's been at Arsenal. When he first got here, he was a little light too. So I think Vieira and ESR need to take the responsibility on themselves to eat some chicken and rice and get to a place where they can, withstand challenges, ride challenges, and play in midfield. It's up to them as well. But I think they need time, and I think they need a platform as well. EK says ESR is very attack-minded midfield, like very attacking mid-minded. He's going to have to improve his defensive contribution a hell of a lot to play left center mid. Let me ask you guys a question. For everybody who feels like Emile Smith-Rowe and Vieira need to have more defensive contribution to play in the 8 role, do you guys feel like when you see like Bernardo Silva and Kevin De Bruyne and Gundogan that they're doing a lot of defensive work? Because I think they do a lot of pressing and closing down, but I don't necessarily see them in the box, defending, like that. I see them tracking runners. I see them, like I said, pressing. But even with Odegaard, like, I don't necessarily see him doing a lot of defensive work per se. I see him, he's part of the collective, but not necessarily super defensive. So I'm not really sold on the aspect that like our left 8 has to be super, like has to be like that defensive. I think they need to be defensively switched on and be a part of like know how to sit in the formation and sit in the shape and track runners and press. But I don't necessarily buy into this idea that like our left 8 needs to be basically like a defensive midfielder that sits in a double pivot, kind of guy that we allow to go forward. So yeah, like Rodri does a lot of the work. He does a lot of the work. And I think that's the problem, is like they have a CDM that kind of does it all. Yes, they contribute, but it gives them the platform to really go forward and really commit numbers. And we don't really have that. So yeah. Let's see. Yo-Yo says Pep has had 5 center backs on the pitch at times during the business end of the season. Rodri, Stones, and midfield Arteta will follow suit. I feel like Arteta might be sitting there like, damn, he got to it before I could, because I just feel like that's where we're going. I think that's why we were going for Lisandro Martinez originally, is because he was going to play left back, but he was going to pinch into that position where Zinchenko was playing. If you look at it, it's not that different. They're doing it with Stones. We would be doing it with Lisandro Martinez. It probably will end up being Kiwior playing that position. That Arteta saying he's going to change the way that we're going to play. That's the only way that it looks like he can do that. He's 6'2". He gives us that same kind of like height advantage that Ben White does. And then you put him next to like a Rice or somebody like that, and you don't need a Xhaka. Like, you don't need a Xhaka because you've replaced that need for like that defensive ability in that position. We don't need it. We won't need it if we play like that. And I think that's where the switch is going to come next season. Cincinnati says players like Raji will win you titles. He's excellent. Ash says, I think Arteta will always going that way regardless of Pep. He's a very smart manager. He did it with Tommy against Poole. Exactly. I don't think he's necessarily copying him. I just feel like they have a lot of the same philosophies, and you know, he wasn't able to really do it because he got Zinchenko instead of Lisandro Martinez. But you bet your ass, if we had got him, he would have been sitting in our midfield, like 100%. Frederick says, Sergio Busquets retired from Barcelona today. What a legend. I'm also a Barca fan besides City. I hear you. I hear you. Tawanda says more depth in CDs then, like CDM or CMs. What do you mean CDs? Let's see. EK says, Jess, I feel Man City have better control in games and are less susceptible to being caught on the transitions than us. Well, of course, they're better than us. They're the best team in the world. Like, come on. Yeah, of course they're better than us in those circumstances. But Man City have not always been amazing on transition. The way that they've been able to figure that out is making sure that they have those like athletic two-way players in their team. And having Rodri in the team, having, you know, all those fast, like Stones and Diaz are not like amazingly fast, but like Akanji, Ake, those guys really stop you from getting transitioned on. They really do. And then they have the smarts in transition to rip players down, foul them, keep the spaces condensed, things like that. We've really struggled with that because we get transitioned on, I think, a lot more because we don't have players that can cover ground the way that they do. They have players that can cover ground. They have players that are smarter, a little bit more streetwise. We get caught out quite a bit because I just don't think we have the same players, and we don't have that same ability to like, okay, this is the time where I need to rip this player down. This is the time where I need to like do this, do that. It comes with time, and we need to change a couple of the players. And somebody that's really good at stopping transitions and stopping players from just running by you is Declan Rice. Like his interceptions, his ball winning ability, his recoveries, like that's what you need. And as good as Thomas Partey is, like he doesn't have those same abilities at that same level. It's going to change, you guys. Yo-Yo says two-way players must remember, people must remember Arsenal chose to go for Xhaka over Gundogan due to their injury history. One tries to be a box-to-box, one is fully a box-to-box player. Fair enough. Let's see. Ash says Partey is nowhere near as athletic as Rice. Exactly. And like, I hate to be that person. Like there's 200 of you guys in here. Please don't hate me for saying it. But I feel like we attribute athleticism to the color of your skin. And like Partey is probably our most athletic midfielder. And that's a problem because he's really not that athletic. Like he is quite the on the ball player. And that's what makes him special, is because he can do some of the, you know, defensive parts of things, but like for the most part, like what he gives you is what he gives you on the ball. But covering wide areas, you know, I always feel like he's gonna, you know, pull his hamstring. He doesn't really tackle that well. He's just somebody that like there's a ceiling on this midfield for sure. And he's so good, but there's just a limit, you know, and we need to go up physicality wise. We need somebody that can cover ground and not pull his hamstring. Right? Rice is athletic. No, he's not fast, but he is athletic and he can cover ground, you know, which is different than Partey. You know, so it's no hate on Partey. It's just different. And we need that. Also, like you look at like somebody like Kiwior, he's rapid. Like he's really, really fast. Like he's fast. He can jump. He can cover ground. Like that is the type of player that you may want to play on your left-hand side. If you watch some of the comps of Kiwior before he came to Arsenal, of course, like his ability to cover space in wide channels is really, really good, you know. So we're changing. We're changing for sure. Yo-Yo says Partey is very much a La Liga midfielder. He happens to play for Ghana. I hear that. Saksham says Rice is good, but for 120 million, in my opinion, Caicedo is better with a higher ceiling. What makes him have a higher ceiling? You know, when people say people have a higher ceiling, I always wonder what that means. Like, what exact attributes do you see that you feel like make Caicedo, you know, he's going to have that higher ceiling? Because I think Rice could be one of the best midfielders in the world under the right manager. And I've never heard Pep talk about Caicedo, but I've heard him talk about Declan Rice. So I actually think Rice has a very high ceiling. I don't know if it's higher than Caicedo's, but he could be, because he's such an all-arounder as well. Like, Arsenal have a lot of specialists in a lot of their positions. I think Saliba is one of our best all-arounders. Ramsdale is an all-arounder. Saka and Martinelli are all-arounders. Odegaard is I think he's pretty all-around as well. But Xhaka and Partey are quite, specialists in what they do. But Rice has a little bit of everything. And if you just up his levels and get him in a better team, and he just increases everything that he does by like 5-7%, he could be the best in the world. I don't know if I feel like that with Caicedo. But Caicedo is still an excellent player, but he's just so young. So I think it's hard for me to look at somebody and say he has a higher ceiling at 20 when I'm looking at a player at 24 and I'm seeing like, yeah, all he needs is like an extra 5%. Like, he really does. Thab says White and Kiwi, Jesus, all-arounders. Yeah, them as well. Like, White and Kiwi especially, I think, are all-arounders. Good on the ball, good athletes. They're physical enough. Like, we've had too many specialists. Like, Bellerin was a specialist. Like, he was basically a winger at fullback, and his only thing that he was really good at was his speed, overlapping, getting into the final third, but he didn't have the defensive part. And so now we have more all-arounders, which is good. For sure. Kevy Kev says that Rice hype, Jess. I'm just saying what I'm seeing. Like I said, I think Caicedo is a really good player, and if we got him, I'd be gassed. I really would be, because I think he's somebody that will take us to another level, because he has what we've been talking about with Rice. He can cover ground. He's good defensively. His interceptions, his ball winning ability. I just feel like Rice has those soft factor things that are important. He has more experience, and I'm just looking at a player that I feel like in a better team could do anything. But that's just me. That's where I'm at. Jackson says what Partey does for Arsenal is very unique. He covers the entire midfield when Odegaard and Xhaka spring forward in attack. I think what he does on the ball for us is pretty special. And I think, he does cover us pretty well. But if I had to say who covers us when Xhaka and Odegaard go forward, I actually say, like, I think Gabriel and Saliba do a lot of that as well. Like, I think they do a lot of that, like pinching into midfield, winning the ball. Partey does a lot of stuff too. I do think Partey needs a Xhaka though. I'm very like, because when Partey does not have Xhaka, he can't play with Vieira and Odegaard, or ESR and Odegaard. Like, he can't, like, he has to have somebody more defensive with him. So it'll be interesting to see if he can do it with a different left back in midfield with him versus like Zinchenko, or if he could do it at all, because I feel like he needs that double pivot almost feeling for him. But he's great. Like, we're talking about fine margins here, and we're talking about taking away maybe one or two players from a midfield that is bordering on 90 points, so I'm not talking about like an average ass midfield. We're talking about fine margins, but Arsenal do need to go to the next level. And so some of the players that we speak about obviously are quality players. We don't have any players right now except for one or two that are just way below the standards, but when we're talking about those fine margins and what could take us up to a city level, I do think you have to look at the CDM. I think you need to look at our left back. You need to look at the left center mid position. And you need to look at maybe attack as well, for sure. Kevy Kev says that one thing I like about Rice is his durability. He rarely misses games, which is good. I like that as well. Saksham says Saka can't even run. We need faster right wing in some tight games. I do think that, that's why Arsenal were looking at Mudryk and why we're looking at Moussa Diaby, is because we need like that sheer pace. But I won't accept any Saka slander here. You know, I know people are like, oh my gosh, Saka, he's so poor during the run-in. He's really not. He missed that penalty, and now people are losing their fucking minds, but okay. Yo-Yo says Partey isn't a DM. That's what it is. Why Zinchenko tucks in? He can play deep, but he shouldn't be shielding a back line on his own. I agree. EK says, David Ornstein said we were interested in Mohamed Kudus. Do you think he'd be a good signing for the left 8 position? Personally, I see a big talent there. The good thing about Mohamed Kudus is that he can play multiple positions, which I love. He's not like a utility player, like, you know, because sometimes people are like, oh, they play multiple positions. That means they're not good at anything. But he's somebody that, remember when we thought that like Saka could play left 8? I still think he can. Kudus is very similar, where he could play in the left 8 position, but he could also play right wing. A left footer that can play in both of those pockets. He's technically really good, like a really good ball progressor. Like he can dribble anybody. And the one thing that he has is that ability to shoot on sight. Like we've seen him score some bangers. You know, so I think Kudus would be good for that 8 position because it also could cover right wing as well if you wanted to do something different and go for a bigger striker. So yeah, I would just need to see more of a link. Like I know Ornstein is pretty reliable, but after the last couple of windows, sometimes I do think he just puts shit out there. Not that he doesn't have the information, but he gets it from different people like agents and stuff like that. So, you know, and sometimes he starts guessing as well. So yeah, I think Kudus would be a good signing for Arsenal because obviously like you get a two-way player, you get athleticism, you get ball progression, you get multiple positions, you get good ball striking ability, you got somebody with some personality. But you know, just need to see more of a link. And Ajax are no fools. They're going to want a lot of money for him. Dale says, do you think Saka playing through the middle is something Arteta will use more, or was it specific to Newcastle? I think it was specific to Newcastle. I think sometimes we do that where Saka and Martinelli switch positions, and you know, sometimes Martinelli ends up central, sometimes Saka does. I think it was a tactic that we used. But we have a fluid front 3, so it's no surprise that you see Saka up front sometimes. Let's see. Lucas says Kudus is injury prone and Eredivisie tax not sure. Well, let's check his injury record. I didn't look at that. A young player with such a bad injury record, really? Let's see. I better see a really bad injury record here. I better not see like just one little calf strain. Somebody had me thinking, I was looking at somebody's and they were like, oh, they have such a bad injury record. Half of it was like illness. Let's see. News. I'm just looking for it. Okay. Like, why can't I see it? Oh, here it is. Duh. Stats. I don't know why it's going so slow. But yeah, I better see a long ass injury list. He's 22. If you're talking about he's injury prone. All right. So in 2021, he had a knock, and then he had a meniscal injury, which is that your knee? Is that your meniscus? I don't know. But you guys can tell me. That was a 79 days, so he missed 15 games. That's significant. And then he had like a fitness issue. Then in 2021, he had a fractured rib, which, I mean, that's unfortunate, right? And then in this season, he's missed 6 games. One because he was ill, and the other one because he had a hamstring injury. I don't know if I would call that injury prone, you know, but he's missed some games, that's for sure. You know, but I hear you. Yeah, the meniscus is a knee ligament, so that happened in 2021. And he missed like 15 games, so he missed a significant amount. And then like you guys said, he fractured his rib, but like fracturing your rib, he must have like gotten hit or something like that, right? But he's really good, you know, but so yeah, we'll see. We'll see about that. But I'm really excited for the summer, despite, feeling a little bit down about maybe not winning the league or, whatever. But the links look good. I would love to get Declan Rice. If we don't end up with Declan Rice, getting Caicedo would be great as well. I do feel like we need to be getting number one targets, though. Like, if you're challenging for the league, and you're bordering on 90 points, and you're the only team that was anywhere near Manchester City, and you let a Manchester United or Chelsea beat you to your number one targets, we need to have a discussion. We really should be getting our number one targets. I know Man City could be in for Rice, but I still feel like if he wants to stay in London, we'd be his best choice. And then, Xhaka, we'll see what happens with him. I do think there's a chance that he could leave, but I also think there's a chance that Thomas Partey may not be here and Emile Smith-Rowe. So we'll see. This could also be posturing for a new deal, which I would say, from my perspective, I'm not sure that I would give Granit Xhaka a new deal. But like I was talking about earlier, I'm not really wedded to the idea that he has to stay. If we were to keep two of our senior midfielders, if it was Jorginho and Thomas Partey, I'd be more than fine with that. And yeah, no Zubimendi, but who cares, because we didn't like him anywhere, did we? So yeah, make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel. We went for like an hour and 48 minutes. I'm going to finish watching Bridgerton, and then Arsenal Women. Actually, I'll probably watch Arsenal Women first, then watch the rest of Bridgerton, and I'll come back tomorrow and we'll talk more about all this stuff. Whatever comes out. Like, you guys know how I do the shows. I see what comes out and then we chat about it. And then we chat about that stuff and then we chat for like another hour because I have no structure. So yeah, but like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye, guys.